Welcome back. It's still Business Daily on Trust TV, and we're being joined by Dr. Samson G. Simon, CEO, ARC Economic and Data Limited. Good morning, Doctor. Thank you for joining us on Business Daily this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right. So earlier I asked the question: this rebasing of the GDP and the CPI by the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, is it important? Is it needed?
It's very important. It's much needed. Mind you, global best practice demands that we do this every 5 years, and this is even coming too late because the last time we did this was 2009 and then 2024. That's a difference of 15 years. So it's a long time in coming, and it's necessary so that we can update the basket of goods and services that we consider in the consumer price index, and then to tweak some of the items too. If you look at food, for example, it has been reduced from 51%. It used to be more than half in terms of the weight to 40%. And apart from that, other items have been added. All of you, I believe you, when the last time we did this in 2009, for example, Uber or Taxify or the gig economy was not as popular as it later became, and there is a need to capture that. So there's a need to keep updating, make sure that all trends, economic trends are captured, all consumer behavioral changes are captured. So it's very necessary, and it's meant to be done as frequently as possible. So the MBS and the Nigerian government have done the right thing by updating the base year and other items for the consumer price index.
All right, so I'm going to ask you two questions in one. Now, how does changing the CPI base year to 2009-2024 provide a more accurate reflection of inflation, one, and what impact does the GDP rebasing have on Nigeria's economic outlook and global ranking?
Well, if you look at where we're coming from, the base year was 2009. 2009, between 2009 and 2024 is 15 years, like I mentioned. The consumption patterns Nigerians had in 2009 is not the same consumption pattern we are having now in 2024 and 2025. And there's a need to capture that. For example, in 2009, for our telcos, the most important thing was buying airtime. Now it's about data. Data has overtaken airtime. So all these changes need to be captured, and when they are captured, they reflect the realities on ground better than what we were having and using a base year that is a long time ago. And then if you, like we've seen in the CPI, by changing the base year, inflation has changed from 34.8 to 24.48. That's a change of more than 10 percentage points. So some people say, all right, inflation has come down. Inflation has not come down. And the statistician general was very explicit that inflation has not come down. It's just that the way we measure it is now a bit different. Just like for unemployment, when we change the methodology, unemployment change from 33% to 5%. This does not mean that more Nigerians have been employed between the time that it was 33% to the time that it became 5%. It's just that the methodology has changed because maybe in the past for unemployment, it was 20 hours a week, it changed to 1 hour a week. In the same manner, for the inflation, the items being considered and then their weight have changed. And definitely the values for inflation will change. And these are estimates. These are not absolute values. They are credible as they come, but that doesn't mean that there's no room for improvement. If anybody can do something better, why not? There's always room for improvement. But these are the estimates that we can authoritatively say reflect the realities on ground in Nigeria at the moment. Nothing else is better. And it's not only the Nigerian authorities, the Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, World Bank, were all co-opted into this. So it has all the credibility it is supposed to have. And then for the GDP, with the rebasing, we expect the GDP size to increase. Just like what we saw the last time it was done, we became the largest economy on the African continent. That possibility is also there now. If it's not like also like suddenly the Nigerian GDP will just balloon. No, it's just that we have better ways of measuring economic activities than what we had before the rebasing.
All right. Now, there have been some new inclusions, like you mentioned them earlier too. Like before, we didn't have maybe the ICT, the e-commerce, and the arts and culture put into play while we were, getting our GDP. Now, these new sectors that have been added, will they affect future economic policies?
Of course, the rebasing will impact, will influence economic policies because this is an updated metric. This is a better metric than what we had before, and that will guide policy making and will make policy making more targeted. And the possibility of it being more effective will be there because you have better data, we have improved data, and when you are guided by the data, when your decisions are data driven, and then the data are as robust as they're supposed to be, that will make your policy making to be more effective. So, of course, this will make our policy making better because we have improved set of data that will guide this policy making.
Now, we've done this rebasing. I know everything we always look forward to is foreign direct investment, investor confidence in Nigeria. How does this help to boost that?
By this rebasing, where we have seen, for example, what just happened after the central bank met, the Monetary Policy Committee met, and they came out with the communique. The treasury bills rate was reduced, and that's because if you look at inflation, you look at the benchmark interest rates, for the first time now in a long while, we are having positive real interest rate because the interest rate is higher than inflation rate. And that's good news. And that would help us to attract more investment, whether foreign direct investment or portfolio investment or other forms of investment, because our interest rates are higher than our inflation rate. So people will be expecting real returns, unlike what we had before now, when the inflation rate was higher than the benchmark interest rate, meaning that you had negative returns. So that will boost investor confidence, and that will help the accretion of the foreign exchange reserves, and probably the value of the naira is expected to appreciate on the back of that.
Now, this new GDP base, how is this going to impact government revenue projections and fiscal planning?
Well, the planning and projections are guided by data, and when we have a rebased GDP, the expectation is that the GDP will be bigger than what we have at the moment, because of the fall in the value of the naira. When the new president came, we floated the naira, and then the removal of subsidy, all of them contributed to making the naira to fall. At the time, something in the region of 2,000 naira to the dollar. But I think the naira is appreciating. It's in the region of 1,500 now, and that made the GDP to crash. It almost reduced by half between 2003 and 2004. So with the rebasing now, the GDP size will likely be bigger. And when the GDP size is bigger, our debt to GDP ratio will automatically reduce because in recent times we're talking about exceeding 50% of GDP in terms of debt. But when the GDP size is bigger, and then our target of becoming a $1 trillion economy will even be more likely now when the base that we're starting is going to be bigger. Maybe the last time it was 199 billion, and after the basing, we get almost twice that. So the projections we need to make to arrive at $1 trillion economy by 2030 will be more likely instead of what we had before. So these things, the rebasing will influence a lot of things, will impact a lot of decision making by the authorities, by investors, and even by consumers. So we expect to see a lot of changes because the GDP has been rebased in the coming months or years.
All right, you mentioned the oil subsidy removal, and now, of course, and other reforms that are being done, economic reforms. With this, how are businesses and consumers meant to interpret or are to interpret these inflationary figures?
Well, we know what the floating of the naira and then the removal of subsidy. These are the major policies introduced by the new president, President Bola Tinubu, when he came on board. And because of that, it has exacerbated inflation. It has also eroded our purchasing power, whether the purchasing powers of the consumer or the producer, and it even diminished consumer confidence to some extent, because when you live in a high inflationary environment, you have to be circumspect, and particularly when prices are not stable. But I think we are beginning to see results, just like the central bank governor mentioned. It's not going to be overnight that we see excellent results and we see the good things that we're hoping for. But at least things are beginning to look up. The reserves have seen major accretion. We are more than $40 billion, and we have more than enough resources for imports. And then the naira is also appreciating slowly but steadily. And then inflation is beginning to moderate. So things are beginning to look up. And I think even though things are tight, but because things are getting a little bit better, it will boost consumer confidence as well. And then Nigerians will begin to get a little bit better, and then the standard of living will also get better. You know, because we import a lot of things, when the exchange rate is going down, when the value of the naira is going down, we tend to bear the brunt of it. But now that the value of the naira is appreciating, and hopefully that trajectory is going to continue, we should expect the standard of living to also look up. I know what is fueling inflation majorly is food item of headline inflation, and we have seen also prices of food items. Some food items actually are beginning to go down. So this should be good news to Nigerians. I'm not saying it's a hoodoo. We still have a long way to go, but at least things are beginning to get a little bit better. And we are hopeful with the current trajectory that things will get better, and then the sufferings of Nigerians will be a little bit alleviated over time.
All right, now let's go to the happenings of yesterday. That was the MPC meeting and the rates. The Central Bank of Nigeria held its benchmark interest rate steady at 27.5%. Now, this is following about 6 consecutive hikes that took place in 2024. Now, according to them, the decision reflects early signs of foreign exchange stability and a gradual easing of inflation, which the National Bureau of Statistics, of course, recently recalibrated to 24.8%. Now, they've made this full stop, this stop. We're going to stop here for now. We're going to maintain this rate at 27.5%. We're not going to go up anymore. But this is after going up like 6 times last year. Now, does this in any way suggest a shift in the monetary policy strategy?
Of course, this is a shift. We have been aggressively hiking interest rates. Throughout 2024, in an unabated way, interest rates have been hiked in a very aggressive way. The hawkish stance was second to none. And we hiked and hiked and hiked like there was no tomorrow. But now that we're holding things steady, it means that the central bank feels that things are beginning to look okay. But they're also careful because they don't want to become too optimistic. They don't want to become over optimistic in such a way that they begin to reduce interest rates and then they stop inflation. So the mandate of the central bank, the overarching mandate of the central bank, is price stability. And if things are getting a little bit better, it becomes necessary for them to become circumspect. And I think that's what they did by holding all the parameters were held steady. And that's just to observe and see how things continue to be. If there is a need for them to reduce interest rates in the coming months, they will reduce interest rates. And if there's a need for them to hike further, they will hike further. And if they feel that, all right, there's no clear direction and they need to be a bit cautious, they will hold in the subsequent meeting. So everything depends on the data. What is the data telling them? Because they are guided by data and they're data dependent. So the data will guide whatever is going to happen. But from all indications, by them holding, I think this is good news in the sense that they feel like things are beginning to get better and they don't want to really take a direction that might hurt production or might hurt the price stability that they're angling for.
All right, now with the inflation at 24.48%, that's the new current number, is keeping the interest rate steady enough to bring it down to single digits?
Well, the objective is globally is 2% or 1 to 3%. That's the ideal globally. For Nigeria, we felt that we might not be able to do that, and we chose 6 to 9%. And even at that 24.48 is way better than what we had in December, which was 34.8, way better. But it's still extremely high. It's still unbearable for Nigerians. And the ultimate objective still remains achieving single-digit inflation figures. And we're still a long way off. But you have a balancing act as a central bank while you're trying to tackle inflation, while you're trying to ensure price stability. You might do it in so much aggressive way that you hurt production. Because into the higher the interest rates, the costlier it becomes to borrow, and then businesses do not expand. And when businesses are not expanding too, that may hurt the objective of achieving price stability. So it's a balancing act. And one has to be very careful, one has to be very cautious, that while you're trying to do one, you don't hurt the other. And I think that's why they are holding rates steady for now. Of course, automatically, prices, inflation rates might not just move to single digits, but the way things pan out will determine the next course of action for the monetary authorities. But for now, they have been circumspect, more especially with the new development, with the rebasing of the consumer price index and the expected rebasing of GDP. So I think it's the right course of action to take for now.
All right, now, how does this decision by the CBN affect or impact borrowing for businesses and consumers?
Well, they're holding rates steady, so it's not like rates are coming down. Rates are not coming down, so the benchmark interest rate still remains at that level at 27.5. So it depends on what the banks or the lenders decide, because they have the benchmark. What would they charge for prime lending rates, and what would they charge for other interest rates? So it's left to them, but the signs are there. The forward guidance has been given that things are a little bit looking up, things are moderating. So the banks might not be as aggressive as they were before, when the central bank was aggressively hiking rates. Now the interest rate is being held steady, so the lenders now will be a little bit relaxed, and they may be open to even reducing what they charge as interest rates. Of course, they will not charge, and also inflation, when the inflation is also lower, that will influence what they charge as interest rates. That's what the banks charge now as lending rates. So all these things will make the possibility of them charging less will be there. But of course, they too will be cautious, because even though inflation is down, interest rates, the benchmark, the anchor rate is not down. It remains the way it was since the last Monetary Policy Committee meeting.
All right, now food inflation. It's we see that that's a major part of this whole conversation. It's going up, and it seems like the only way we're going to be able to bring our inflation down to a reasonable extent is if the food prices go down as well. Now, how do they in any way play in the broader inflationary trend, and what can be done to address this situation?
Food inflation has been the main driver of inflation. Even before the rebasing, it was higher than headline, it was higher than core. And even at this particular moment, food inflation is still a major problem. And if you look at food production is a major problem. And that's not largely within the purview of the monetary authorities because it's not their responsibility to fix agriculture. We know that inflation is meant to be driven by money supply, and they have done their bit to bring money supply to a level that inflation will also come down. Sadly, they have been trying to reduce money supply. Sadly, the money supply has not reduced, and it has reached unprecedented levels over time. So that means there's something that has not been done right. The fiscal authorities and the monetary authorities might be working at cross purposes, and that's why all the efforts of the central bank to bring food supply, to reduce food supply and ultimately inflation might not have yielded the necessary results. And there is a need for the fiscal authorities too to meet the monetary authorities halfway. And how do they do that? The agricultural aspect of this, the food aspect of inflation, is largely within the purview of the fiscal authorities. And that means they have to fix agriculture. And assigning a relatively measly 800 billion in 2025 budget to agriculture, which is something in the region of maybe 1% or 2% of the budget, is not good enough. There's a need to fix agriculture. And how do you fix agriculture? Not by asking all Nigerians to become farmers and by paying lip service to that. There's a need for mechanization. There's a need for modernization of agriculture. There's a need for tractorization of agriculture. There's a need for improved breeds of inputs for farms. If all these things can be done, we know they cannot be done overnight, and the government alone cannot do that. There is a responsibility of the government to provide that enabling environment for people to do it. And that's the way we can fix agriculture, because Nigeria is the worst place on earth when it comes to affordability of food. Nigerians cannot afford Nigerian foods. Secondly, in terms of availability, also we are not doing good.
All right, now the government, which you said earlier, is aiming for 6 to 9% GDP growth, but current projections are quite low. Now, how will stable interest rates affect this economic growth, or rather affect Nigeria's economic growth?
There is a need to maintain interest rates that are accommodative, interest rates that will not be discouraging for investments, for businesses, and for production to take place. And when you're charging exorbitant interest rates, you're dissuading businesses, you're dissuading investors from investing. So when you're holding steady and the possibility of even bringing down, cutting interest rates is there, that would be good news to that would be good news to producers, the businesses. I believe the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria and other business membership organizations will be happy when at least the progress of holding, even though interest rates are not down, and the possibility of even bringing them down is on the horizon. I think that would be good news for them, because high interest rates actually killed businesses, and it discourages them from borrowing because they struggle to pay back when the interest rates are very high. And mind you, this is just benchmark interest rates.
Okay.
And for those lenders, they may add rather than reduce the interest rates on what the central bank is issuing. So the interest rate could probably be way higher than it is now. And when you're not even lending to blue chip companies, you may charge exorbitantly for the amount of money you're lending to them. So everything must be done to ensure that interest rates are stable, to ensure that businesses are not dissuaded from borrowing money from banks, so that they can expand, so that they can venture into new territories, and then the economy can eventually grow and expand, and there'll be enough employment to go around and better prospects for everybody within the economy.
Okay, so Doctor, just before we go, in 30 seconds, should businesses expect further tightening or easing of monetary policy in the coming months?
It depends. It depends on the data. Where the central bank is guided by the data, is data dependent. When things get better, when inflation begins to go down, when there's disinflation is moderating, then interest rates will likely come down. But when interest rates spike or continue to spike, then we should expect more hiking of interest rates.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Samson G. Simon, for joining us on Business Daily this morning, giving us your insights on the Consumer Price Index, the rebasing of the GDP and the CPI, and the MPC rates released by the CBN. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
That's what we're discussing today on the program, the CPI, the GDP, and the MPC rate. And I'm sure you've got to see the new figures and how it might impact your business. That's what we have for you today on the program. Same time, same place on Monday. To stay with us for more news, programs, and documentaries. So follow us on our social media platforms and on our YouTube live stream. I am Chiamaka Mwafo. Bye for now.